Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Born of the Gods here from Valencia, Spain. My name is Marshall Sutcliffe. I am in the booth with Zach Hill and Hall of Famer Randy Buehler. Gentlemen, we have a pretty interesting matchup here. We have Shi Tian playing against Anssi Alkio. Zach, what does Shi Tian's deck do?
Shi Tian's deck, we've been calling it Blue Moon, is basically an old-school blue control deck with counterspells like Remand and Mana Leak and Spell Snare, and late-game threats, kind of finishers like Batterskull, Master of Waves. But the innovation is it locks out a lot of games with Blood Moon, making all the opponent's non-basic lands into mountains. A good chunk of the format just can't cast spells when that card's in play.
And Randy, what about on the other side of the table for Anssi?
Yeah, Alkio's playing the Splinter Twin deck, and he's there's three flavors of this deck in the top 8. He's got sort of the purest combo version of the deck. It's just blue-red. It didn't branch out into other colors. It's basically it's similar to the list that Patrick Dickman won a Grand Prix with in Antwerp back in October. Dickman also we'll see later in this top 8. But Anssi has sort of tweaked it to make it better for this weekend's metagame, sort of post-bannings. And, basically, blue-red combo. The goal is to get Splinter Twin onto a creature that can untap the Splinter Twin guy and then go off and just attack with those infinite guys.
All right, so we're underway here, and Ansi's kicked things off with the Serum Visions. He's making his decisions. Now, he's going to know what his opponent's up to. He's going to be able to craft his plan from before the game even starts.
Oh, yeah,
about how he wants
these guys
to
got
approach
deck lists yesterday. They and their friends and teammates have been playtesting this exact matchup. It's not the case where in the Swiss of the game yesterday, the day before, you could definitely win a game where your opponent just misunderstood what was going on.
Right.
Especially a deck out of left field like the Blue Moon deck.
We actually saw that in the feature match area as well. The first time Teferi was cast, there was a big shatter pause, a big, wait, I'm going to read this thing, and it didn't end well.
Not going to see people reading cards today.
That's right.
And for some of the decks in the top 8, actually, and like you mentioned with Blue Moon, I mean, it was a big edge to have the opponent not know what was happening. Some of the hybrid Splinter Twin decks can win without even playing their combo. And when your opponent doesn't know your deck list, that means they can sideboard just completely wrong.
All right, so no action yet so far, just a couple of lands in play for both players. And we'll note here that Shi Tian's deck does try to go very long. And here's an interesting one, Vidalcan Shackles. How does that affect Ansi's plan?
Well, if he can manage to steal a creature out from under a Splinter Twin, that's a problem.
Okay, so Anssi Alkio is going to have to basically keep in mind that thing for the whole rest of the game unless he has a way to maybe bounce it or interact with it in some way.
Right. From Lee's side of the table, what you want to focus on is just keeping 2 mana up with Vidalcan Shackles. Both Pestermite with 2 power, Deceiver Exarch with 1 power. Very easy targets for the Vidalcan Shackles. And even playing something like a Snapcaster Mage becomes a lot riskier because your opponent can then use it to put you under pressure.
Okay. Now, does Anssi have any way to interact with the Vidalcan Shackles in his main deck? Remember, we're in game 1 here.
He's got a couple Cryptic Commands, which could, in theory, bounce it. The other thing is, I haven't played a ton with Splinter Twin against Vidalcan Shackles, but I think Kiki Jiki can still combo, right? Or I guess you steal the Kiki Jiki and then the combo doesn't work?
Right. I think you steal the Kiki Jiki in response
so if it's
to
a
it being
Splinter
targeted.
Twin, I mean, you're not going to see any of this actually happen. Basically, Shi Tian's going to leave it untapped until and Alkio's not going to go for it and walk into a Shackles. But it's kind of funny. Like, if he has the Splinter Twin version of his combo, then the problem is that Shackles will steal it out from under the twinned creature. If he's got the Kiki Jiki version of the combo, then the Kiki Jiki will get stolen.
Now, Spellskite, is that a thing for Anssi? I know that some of these lists will.
He has 1 Spellskite. That is the other way he can interact.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how
this
about
second
another
Shackles,
Vidalcan Shackles?
I mean, Alki seems like he knows this is annoying. This is going to create problems for him. And so the first one, I think he felt he could play around. Now the second one is definitely getting a pause. We don't know what's in Alkio's hand.
Yeah, I'm assuming that it's a Cryptic Command, and it is. I can see it there, although
he doesn't have Cryptic Command mana yet.
He doesn't. Does he not?
No, he's only got 3 untapped, right?
Yeah, you're correct. And also, Shi Tian has 2 mana up.
What does he respond to?
What did he just do?
I think he was trying to cast Spell Snare, but he accidentally grabbed Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah, it's like, that is not how much Snapcaster Mage costs, but he Spell Snared.
A little bit of top 8 jitters going on, I think.
I think so. I mean,
and we've all reached for the wrong card in our hands, I think.
Sure.
Now, right now, I mean, Tian has 2 shackles out, doesn't have the mana to cast it, or to actually activate it. So this is sort of a shields down moment. But
yeah,
of course,
but he doesn't have enough mana to tap out.
Exactly.
If he hadn't cast the Remand, the dream would have been end step, Pester Might, untap Splinter Twin, something like that.
But right, and now
Which is where you were going with that.
Precisely. Now, Chen, he has 2 Snapcaster Mages, and the Vedalken Shackles put him in a really good place. The downside for Chen is that his Snapcaster Mages don't really have a lot of targets right now. Hard for him to get ahead. So Alkio's under no pressure, really, to remove those Vedalken Shackles.
That's right. Now, Shi Tian does have a Batter Skull in his hand. It is one of his relatively few finishers in the deck, but he is under no obligation to cast that this early in the game.
Can we get Alkio's hand? Is that possible? What's going on?
So, right now we're on Alkio here.
Yeah, I think that Batter Skull is going to stay in Shi Tian's hand until he has plenty of mana. Like, he does not want to tap below Vedalken Shackles mantle. Every time if he tapped out main phase, Alkio could just kill him.
Right.
And Tian knows that. He's not planning to tap out main phase. You know, he risked the shackles so that he could sit behind this wall of defense.
That's right. I think
but now he's done tapping out.
I think he's drawn a Master of Waves here as well, so same problem.
Yeah, he's not going to tap out.
These are nice finishers. He just won't tap his mana.
You know, maybe at 6 he would play Master and leave up 1 shackles.
And I think you have to, just in order to start doing something. But you're right that the temptation when you're playing a control deck like this is to get ahead of yourself and start trying to end the game. But, you know, against a deck like Twin, it's not as though, okay, your opponent's going to stick a threat that you'll deal with later. You're just dead.
Right. So the problem here is that Anssi Alkio gets to keep sculpting his hand with these Serum Visions, which he just cast, and setting up where he has multiple redundancy as far as counterspells go. So it's actually, there is some level of pressure on Shi Tian to do something at some point here, as his opponent is going to just be able to sculpt this masterpiece and go off. Though those shackles are a big problem.
Yeah, they're definitely going to take a while for Alkio to get the right answer. I think that Tian's also, against most decks this weekend, he's been able to play Blood Moon and just blank most of their cards.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a bad matchup for Tian because Alkio isn't particularly vulnerable to Blood Moon.
Right.
I mean, he's got basic islands. Mm-hmm. He likes red mana. He casts spells with red mana, so like he's fine for mana. In fact, he's so resilient to Blood Moon that he plays his own in his sideboard.
So this Serum Visions here for Chen is huge because it means that now his Snapcaster Mages can generate value as opposed to just being 2 mana, 2/1 creatures. I actually don't hate the idea of it's one of the last several turns just running a Snapcaster Mage out there to start applying pressure. But now with Serum Visions in your graveyard, it means he doesn't have to tap 5 for Batter Skull, 4 for Master of Waves. He can play 3, get a threat on the table, generate some card advantage, and also just draw into more lands so that Batter Skull and Master of Waves become live.
So if you're in Lee's seat, you want to start pressing some amount of advantage here.
I think so. I mean, the thing is, like, if you don't, you know, your opponent's just going to sit there and draw cards.
Right.
And your opponent's deck is the one that gets to operate at instant speed. Mm-hmm. And in a matchup where you have 2 sort of pseudo-control decks, the one that has flash cards, spells, creatures, threats, tends to have the advantage.
Yes, thanks.
All right, so we get a look at Alkio's hand here. A pair of Deceiver Exarchs, so that's interesting.
Yeah, no, they can actually tap the shackles by sort of giving themselves up. Like if he goes end step, summon Deceiver Exarch, he can, instead of untapping one of his own things, he can tap the opponent's Vedalken Shackles. Now, Shi Tian will respond by stealing the Exarch, but okay, I mean, you effectively got the twiddle effect. Like, if he's got enough mana that he can run 2 of those out to eat both, you know, force both the shackles to fire off, now he's got a clear window to combo off.
That's right.
Another thing that he can do with those is to, I guess, reduce, basically, you know, if Chan has 2 shackles, but only 2 mana open, he can actually tap an island and force Lee to use the shackles, creating another kind of opening.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 mana to essentially tap 1 permanent, but I mean, that's the kind of hand he needs to sculpt to get out from under those 2 shackles, because he can't combo kill while there's shackles and untapped mana.
We saw Anssi Alkio throw a bolt at Shi Tian's face. He knows that there's no other relevant targets. There's germ tokens floating around.
Snapcaster.
Yes, that is
it's
true.
Just better.
There are snaps, and he knows, and he actually knows that Shi Tian does have a Snapcaster as well.
Accidentally attempted to counter a 2-mana spell with one.
Yeah, I gave him a little preview there, but it looks like he doesn't. He's not too worried about Snapcaster mages attacking him at this point, so he's just, instead of discarding, going to start throwing bolts.
Yeah, I mean, that play, it's mana efficient, and he's got an Electrolyze in his hand, so it might be trying to bait out from Chan a Snapcaster to get some more value with Electrolyze.
Okay.
At the same time, I think Chan's most likely threat is going to be a Snapcaster Mage, at least at first, because that requires the least commitment. He's got Serum Visions, but it looks like
I'm with you. I think I would have run one out by now.
So if you're sitting in Li Shi Tian's
Right.
seat right now, what's your game plan? I mean, he seems content to just keep hitting land drops and let the game go long right now while sitting on his Vidalcan shackles.
Yeah, once he's got enough mana, he'll play a Master or a Batterskull and still be able to activate the 2 shackles. I mean, he's close to that, right? He could tap 5 and have 4 untapped. He's just worried about multiple Exarchs coming down. I think he wants some cushion.
Well, interestingly, I mean, if I'm in Lee's seat, I sit there and I think, okay, my opponent did run out Lightning Bolt. If I sit here long enough, can I get Lightning Bolt? Can I get Electrolyze out of his hand? And then my Snapcasters suddenly are threats that might actually stick. So I think maybe once you see that Lightning
he just
Bolt,
end-step discarded Splinter Twin.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, wow.
So Anssi Alkio discards Splinter Twin as he was at 8 cards missing a land drop there. Another Snapcaster off the top for Li Shi Tian.
and that's one of the reasons why we probably saw him Lightning Bolt, is he's going to have to discard anyway.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
right. Yep. And so here, Snapcaster Mage going to be on a Serum Visions here. You mentioned this earlier, Zach. This is a way for Li Shi Tian to get ahead and stay ahead on cards, keeping in his land drops, and also potentially apply some pressure.
Yeah, and I think you have to do that eventually. But again, I mean, what I appreciate about Lee's play right here is that, there's really no reason to get in a hurry. A way a lot of people lose blue-on-blue matchups is they feel kind of compelled to do something. And again, that's the temptation. I mean, we've been sitting here saying it now. But ultimately, it's largely a battle of cards and mana. And you don't want to go low on mana when your opponent has so many potentially lethal threats and you don't have perfect information about what's in their hand.
All right,
Yeah,
so
that was a main phase?
going to take a no. It was with the Snapcaster activation on the stack.
Right, but it's a main phase Snapcaster so that he could flash back the
Serum Visions, right?
Yes.
And Anssi Alkio, though, wants to make sure that he doesn't get that card off the top with Serum Visions first and that the Snapcaster Mage is going to be dead. He wants to make sure he can go as long as he needs to get all the tools acquired.
I wonder if Alkio has enough stuff. Is this the window? Like his Li Shi Tian tapped 3 mana. I mean, Alkio cycled through his Electrolyze. It's getting close, right?
I think so. I mean, he has Exarch, Pestermite, Twin, and 2 Cryptics.
Right.
So, I mean, he's getting into a position to be able to fight a fight. It's just a matter of, I think, just how many mana does he have access to.
Yeah, trapping the 3 for
He doesn't quite have
Electrolyze.
9 here.
Because if he had 6 mana,
Yeah, he could play all 3 of those.
He could Exar to Shackles, get it stolen, Pestermite to Shackles, get it stolen, then play his 3rd Deceiver Exart and Splinter Twin and win despite all that.
That's right. He's
close.
unfortunately
He's at
1 mana
8 land.
short right now. He's got 8 right now.
That's
so
why he was
needs
cycling
1
through the
more.
Electrolyze, I think.
Makes sense. I mean, this is a complicated matchup. There,
Absolutely.
Both players' hands are basically pretty full. You've got a lot of options.
And 2
Yeah,
Vidalcan Shackles on the battlefield makes things pretty tough for Anssi. It makes him really have to stretch a bit here.
Alkio did not draw land off either the Electrolyze or his draw phase. So he's looking at having to discard again, which is kind of too bad here because now he likes all 8 of his cards.
Right. Yeah, Remand, amazing in matchups like this because sometimes you can target your own spell and actually generate card advantage off the Remand, relevant when you're having, for example, a Cryptic Command fight.
Right.
It's crazy how these blue and blue matchups
Right.
work.
He gets rid of the Pestermite,
He has
though.
to discard Pestermite.
And that's another thing you're
He
thinking.
really
when
needed a
you're-
land there. Like running out of land is when you lose.
Exactly, and that's why those cantrips are so powerful. Chen might just be saying, okay, my opponent has a lot of cards. I don't want to give him remand targets to draw on any more lands. But when you're sitting here and your opponent's discarding, you're heavily incentivized not really to do anything because you basically got a source of card advantage just with your opponent's draw step.
Now, Li Shi Tian has 6 cards in hand, and he's drawn a 2nd Blood Moon. He hasn't run out the first one.
Yeah, Li Shi Tian's hand does nothing. There's basically, is there even a relevant spell in there? I guess there's some Snapcasters.
There's
Yeah.
a Snapcaster
Which can
Mage.
get Spell Snare.
There's a Batterskull, Master of Waves, a Blood Moon, and
There's not a counterspell for the Snapcaster.
No counter,
All
right.
they get is Spell Snare.
there's a Spell Snare. That's it.
But yeah. I mean, all those cards might be, good way later in the game. You see him not using his sack lands because I think he just wants to draw more lands to
Right.
turn those cards on.
Oh,
But-
Blood Moon's pretty good here, isn't it? We talked about how Alkio's deck is not super vulnerable to Blood Moon, but you know what? He wants to build up a board of blue He wants to cast a lot of blue spells all on the same turn, and this Blood Moon sort of prevents him from doing that.
Yeah, and I really like Blood Moon here because you know your opponent needs to make land drops.
You force him to crack all his fetch
Exactly.
lands.
Force him to crack all his fetch lands, remove lands from his deck, making it even more likely he's just going to draw and start discarding.
Yeah, Alkio, the fact that he whiffed on those last two draw phases, finding a land, is gigantic here.
Shi Tian's also made sure to wait until an opportune moment here, land-wise, as he now has mana to not only activate both Shackles, but also cast Snapcaster and Flashback Spell Snare in case that becomes an issue.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's Spell Snare counters Remand.
Fully set up. It counters Remand, right?
The Spell Snare not really at its best in this matchup.
Right.
I think its only big targets are Remand, Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah.
But fortunately, those are two of the premier spells in this, in a blue-on-blue matchup, and it prevents something from happening like against Snapcaster Mage just kind of being an incidental clock. So,
Right.
I mean, with the Shackles, it's not an issue, but ordinarily in the matchup.
What a strange game.
Yeah, this is
Those
a
two
very bizarre
Shackles,
game.
and then Shi Tian has done absolutely nothing else.
And I mean, Alkio's hand is amazing, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's the exact kind of hand that you want in this matchup.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
His hand is ridiculous. Look at his hand. Snapcaster, double Deceiver, Exarch, Remand, Splinter Twin, double Cryptic. Now he's got 1, 2, 3,
What did he draw?
4, 5 islands on the battlefield here as well. I think he drew that Snapcaster.
you were getting to the point where, like,
No, he had that
you're
one.
kind of
He
tempted.
drew a land.
Yeah.
He drew a land.
Yeah, I think he drew a land. But you're kind of tempted to just start trying to bounce those Shackles at the end of the turn with Cryptic.
I would be, for
the,
sure.
The thing is, like, you can't expect that your opponent's hand is like a bunch of threats. You know, you have to expect at least a single counterspell.
Yeah, that's the thing. The reason Alkio's not going for it is that he's thinking about the fact his opponent's deck has Cryptic Command, his opponent's deck has Remand, Mana Leak. You know, he could easily have, and Spell Snare, and he could easily have Snapcasters to flash those back. So Alkio is playing around the permission that isn't even in Shi Tian's hand.
Then Alkio, cracking all those lands, has plenty of blue mana for the first Cryptic. I actually think...
He's got 5 blue, 3 red. Yep.
But he needs 6 blue on the same turn in order to cast both Cryptics, which means that he can't protect that with Remand given the current state of his board. He can't cast both Cryptics in the same turn either. So.
No, he can't. He's really tanked out here, though. He does seem like he wants to do something. If he did draw a land, then he hasn't played it yet for the turn. He's doing some math here, though.
Yeah, I mean, this is a hard board state to figure out. You know, you can tap a lot of things, you can counter a lot of things. Your opponent can steal stuff, and you can respond to those triggers.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, Alkio has not lost a match of Modern all weekend. He was the only undefeated player in the entire field. But I doubt he's played a lot of Twin versus Untapped Vidalcan Shackles.
Right.
This is just not in, I mean, the Blue Moon deck is not in anybody's playtest gauntlet except for the MTG Mint guys who noticed it at the last Modern PT.
And that's a really great thing, I think, about playing a deck like this, is that you've played pre- and post-board against all of your opponent's configurations, and they probably have not against yours, meaning that they're having to do a lot more thinking on the fly that you've kind of scripted.
He just drew a land now.
Yeah, he's up to 9.
So now he's up to 9. Lee draws a land for his turn as well. It's a mountain once it's on the battlefield.
Yeah, and it looks like he's going to play it tapped. And, again, you're thinking, okay, he has mana to play a Batter Skull with a ton of mana open, but, he can't win a counter fight. He knows that.
Is it time? Alkio's thinking, no, not time yet.
Alkio certainly has options here, but he just doesn't feel like he's under any pressure whatsoever to make any move here. I mean, he can, he has plays that can put out the winning combo on the battlefield.
But his hand doesn't get better.
Yeah. Is that right? I mean, is this like? Do you think there's something specific in his mind that he
I'm trying
says,
to figure out what
if
it
I get
is.
these 7 exact cards, then I'll go for it?
I think he
here's
just
some
wants
Master
more
Waves
mana.
now for Shi Tian, though. So he's finally going to be assertive here and put out some power and toughness to start beating down with.
And he drew a Vapor Snag, which lets him bounce Master of Waves if it's targeted. It allows him to play Snapcaster Mage and bounce it back to his hand
This
again.
might get Cryptic Commanded, though.
And Vapor Snag also obviously can target Pestermite or Splinter Twin.
That's right. I mean, does
Do you fire
Anssi pick a
Cryptic
fight,
here?
Cryptic, bounce one of your Shackles, and then...
Cryptic and Bounce a Shackle seems at least tempting.
Yeah, although he doesn't have the mana to play a second Cryptic to counter it back on
But
the
he just
way
wants,
down.
he doesn't need to win the fight on Tian's turn. He just needs to get mana tapped. Like, the way Alkio wins is he picks a fight on Shi Tian's turn,
Right.
and then a bunch of mana gets tapped, and then Alkio untaps and wins.
I completely agree.
That is the plan. It's pick a fight. He does not need to win the first fight. He just needs to get Li Shi Tian to tap his mana.
Yeah, I love Cryptic
And so, yeah,
here.
the fact that Li Shi Tian volunteered to tap 4 means Tian is going to now pick a fight in his end step.
All right, so
we're
Ansi's
about
going
to
to lead
see
off with
something.
Deceiver Exarch here, and it looks like this game is going to get underway in a big way as Master of Waves has prompted a bit of a scuffle here on the
Master
top
resolved.
8.
Now we're end step.
That's right. And now we've gotten to end step, and Anssi says, all right, it is my time to go. He's going to play a Deceiver Exarch. He's targeted Vidalcan Shackles with
so it's
it.
resolved. The Shackles is going to steal it like we predicted.
And I think the Vapor Snag is what made Li Shi Tian go for it, because even if both Shackles are tapped, he can
still has a Vapor Snag.
Exactly. He can snag in response to Splinter Twin.
That's a great point.
All right, so the Vidalcan Shackles gets activated, targeting Deceiver Exarch. And now Anssi Alkio has to decide what he wants to do about that.
That just happens, right?
And there it goes.
Yeah, I think so.
And now
And
he's
there we
got
go.
another one.
And he's able to...
Or does he Cryptic Command bounce here?
I think he's going to play either an Exarch or a Pestermite and is able to protect it whatever happens with Cryptic.
Yeah, he
No,
actually
can't protect it
discarded
from
that
being stolen
Pestermite, so
with
he's going to play the Deceiver
Shackles.
Exarch
No,
here.
that's for sure. But then that taps... Oh, you're right. And then
But then
has
he
to
can bounce.
untap.
Then he can Cryptic Command.
Exactly.
Got it.
All right,
Yeah.
so Deceiver Exarch enters the battlefield. Is going to target the other Vidalcan Shackles here.
And yeah,
That Vapor Snag is going to be gigantic.
I mean,
Shi Tian is going to steal.
He says, activate my Shackles, steal your Deceiver
Right,
Exarch.
and now Alkio can bounce one of them, which he thinks is going to free an Exarch so that he can untap and twin it up. And he's going to get... But he may get blown out by Vapor Snag.
the other relevant card right now is Remand. I mean, even though Vapor Snag's a 1-mana spell, he only has 3 mana.
Alkio taps out for... He's going to have to tap out for Cryptic Command. He's tapped completely out.
All right, so Alkio
here's the
taps
window.
out for Cryptic Command. He's going to say, bounce one of your Shackles here. I didn't hear what the other mode was.
Probably draw a card.
Right.
I think so.
That happens. He does, in fact, draw a card. Now, Li Shi Tian's end step, and he says, I've got a Vapor Snag.
Before
Get
you
rid of that
untap.
thing. And that's going to put Anssi down to 14 and put it back in his hand. So Anssi gets to untap with all of his mana and his opponent holding only 2 blue mana sources there on the battlefield.
Wow, and I don't understand bouncing at the end step, because now
He doesn't let him untap.
So it has summoning
has to
sickness
bounce-
if he plays it now.
Yeah,
if he
it has
plays the
summoning
Splinter Twin
sickness.
on it, then
that's
he can't
right.
go
Okay,
off.
right.
So it won't work.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Splinter Twin doesn't say tap it. It's actually gives it
it the
a
ability
tap
to tap.
ability.
Gives it the
so it has
ability
summoning
to tap.
sickness.
Correct. That's
Excellent
also
point,
why
Randy.
Torp Board works on that kind of thing. So
Okay.
anyway, that
thing
means
that-
it basically means that Anssi does not get to go off that turn, and he has to pass the turn back to Li Shi Tian, which he has done.
Yeah, huge victory.
Yeah, so a big swing there for Li Shi Tian. Also, remember, he's now got 5 power on the battlefield too.
Yeah, here's the thing I don't understand. 5 turns ago, Alkio had to discard, and he chose to discard a Pestermite. And if he had discarded Snapcaster Mage on that turn, he would have had a 3rd creature to go in Li Shi Tian's end step. Now, he can play a 3rd creature. Instead of having to Cryptic Command to bounce Shackles, he could just play a Pestermite. But then it would have gotten Vapor Snag. They were in the same situation.
Li Shi
Yeah, it
Tian
doesn't
is
actually
now
matter.
playing his Vidalcan Shackles again. He wants to get this back on the battlefield here, and Anssi, again, has to figure out what his new line is now that that other one didn't work.
I'm surprised that Lee didn't untap his other Vedalken Shackles.
And just give him back.
Why? So that he could respond to more Splinter Twins, as opposed to that one where, like, okay, it's definitely not wearing a Splinter Twin. Mm-hmm. So,
All right, here's Cryptic Command on the second Vidalcan Shackles. It's going to be met with a Remand here. Remand does prevent it from being recast, I believe. He's only got, 2 more blue sources.
He's only got 5 islands in his whole deck. So.
All right, so he has all of them on the battlefield.
Well, 5 is a very different from number than 6.
It is, that second Cryptic gets shut off.
Not that he has one in his
All
hand.
right, so Cryptic Command goes back to his hand, and Vidalcan Shackles looks like it's resolving here.
Because normally in a board state like this, if you remand a Cryptic, they have enough mana, you can be like, okay, well, just cast it again.
Exactly.
But in this case, it's a whole nother turn.
That's right. Yeah, Li Shi Tian's deck uses Remand better than most decks I've seen. I mean, it actually makes it into a hard counter a lot of the times as far as keeping it off the battlefield for at least 1 turn cycle. All right, here comes some attacks.
So Alkio still has 2 Exarchs in his hand?
It looks like he does, yes.
So he has the one that got Vapor Snagged, and he drew another one?
But
So
yeah,
Did he
attacked
not
with the
attack with
Deceiver
Master
Exarch,
Waves?
But Master Waves did not get in the red zone. What's the...
I think he just doesn't want it to get blocked by Deceiver Exarch.
If...
You can attack with the token.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also could get blocked. I think he doesn't want to fight a fight over Deceiver Exarch right now.
Okay.
Here's some peak technology.
Oh,
this
man.
is awesome. Anssi Alkio now knows exactly what he needs to play around.
Right. It turns out it's double
And it's not much.
Snapcaster and a Batter Skull. Yeah, the only relevant spells are Snapcasters. And, I mean, what do we have? A Remand
It's a
and
Remand
a Spell
now.
Snare in the graveyard
Yes.
for Shi Tian. So... Great information here. Of course,
Yes.
a draw, too, for Anssi Alkio. And if he has the tools in his hand, he's going to know that the way is potentially clear for him here.
He's got how much mana left? 5?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5
So he
with a blue mana source.
Cannot play 2 Exarchs.
Right.
He's also only got 1 blue mana.
Right.
Interesting.
And they're still untapped Shackles from Chan's side of the board. So
Well, the first Exarch could tap it, and then the second Exarch could be live. But he doesn't have enough blue mana to do all that this turn.
exactly.
That's what he...
But it
No,
looks
you
like
may as well run one out. Sure. Run it out. Let him steal it with the Shackles. If Shi Tian
He's
is
going to untap his own island here.
Oh, which would let him cast.
cute.
Oh,
so he can
slick.
cast both. But this has not happened yet. So right now, Deceiver Exarch is on a stack, and Shi Tian's thinking about what he wants to do.
Because if you target your island, it's resolved. But
Yeah, I know.
didn't say-
You just very unclear there then.
Right, so just making sure that we're abundantly clear here from Shi Tian's side. He's like, look, if you start untapping your island, it means it's already on the battlefield, and that's not the case yet. So Lee's looking at the Snapcaster. Of course, Anssi knows exactly what cards Shi Tian has at this point. He has perfect information. And the question is he going to go for Snapcaster on Remand here?
And it's a really hard decision. I mean, at this point, like, Lee wants to draw some cards, not just to have access to more stuff, but to have more information that Alkio doesn't know perfectly. I mean, that peak was
point.
huge.
Yes.
Good point.
And we've seen that throughout this whole entire game. This is game 1 of the match. It's best 2 out of 3 here in the quarterfinals. And Anssi has been, he's been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. If he had a peek, he would have known a long time ago that he actually had a clear way at multiple different times during this game. But those Vidalcan Shackles doing serious work, especially the second one. You guys noted that when it came down, how much harder that makes it for Anssi Alkio to actually go off. He still absolutely can, but those have been a nice insurance plan for Shi Tian thus far.
I'm a big fan. Alkio apparently plays one peak.
The one of peak.
Nice.
Absolutely love that.
Maybe that's what he was waiting for.
Careful testing has revealed that. And a lot of people, Pika doesn't see a lot of play anymore because of Gitaxian Probe. But being able to do it at instant speed is obviously really valuable when most of your deck operates at instant speed.
Yeah, I talked to Dickman about that. He was running Gitaxian Probes because he wanted more sorceries in his deck for his Tarmogoyf.
I like that.
So
It looks like Shi Tian's still trying to decide if he wants to respond here.
Yeah, he is definitely fears the combo. He fears that he might be about to die.
Absolutely.
And right now, Alkio has Mountain up because with Blood Moon in play, he currently has no access to blue mana.
That's right. He's
But
trying to unlock one of those islands to get him access to the other one.
And if you're going to remand this, then not attacking with Master of Waves doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
True.
If you're going to fight over the Exarch anyway. So I think he's kind of reconsidering the line that he thought about in his head earlier.
Okay. So he's also trying to map out what the next turn could look like. Remember, Shi Tian does not know what's in Anssi Alkio's hand. All right, so he lets it resolve. Anssi targets his island, and in response, or with the trigger on the stack, Shi Tian is going to steal the Deceiver Exarch with his Vidalcan Shackles. And this looks like it's going to prompt another Deceiver Exarch.
Which almost certainly gets remanded.
It feels like a must remand here from Shi Tian.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is going to tap him out.
Yeah, but because there's nothing on Alkio's side of the board, Summoning Sickness will prevent the combo from happening.
Right.
Shi Tian will get to untap if he taps out for remand here.
Now, what is the interaction exactly like between Deceiver Exarch and Shackles? Could you untap a Shackles and get your Exarch back? And have 2 things to try and combo off of? I'm only thinking about that because if your opponent's tapped out, then that might mean that, okay, they can't respond by just activating Shackles again.
I think Deceiver can only untap your own permanents. So Pestermite can do that, but not Exarch.
Interesting.
That's huge. If he had a Pestermite here, and he did discard a
There's
Pestermite
one in
like
the
6 turns
graveyard.
ago. Yeah, he could have a Pestermite in his hand instead of a Snapcaster. Okay, so here's Snapcaster for Remand, like we were expecting.
All right, that's going to get Shi Tian a draw step. So he does have an unknown card here. Unfortunately, he has no mana available at all. So Anssi Alkio, if he has anything that he wants to do here, he can do it. I mean, we mentioned earlier that he doesn't get to just combo off here.
He's up a lot of cards, though. He's really worked his way through Shi Tian's resources. He's seen his hand.
That said, Shi Tian finally put himself where now he has 2, 4, 6, 7. He has 8 power on the board. He has a 2-turn clock possible.
Yeah, Deceiver Exarch being a 1/4 is actually kind of
Shi
savage.
Tian, like you said, he's choosing not to untap Shackles. You would untap Shackles here, Zach?
I mean, I need to think it through, but I like being able to have Shackles specifically
To respond to
Splinter Twin. Exactly. And like the 1/4s aren't like really putting a lot of pressure on your opponent.
They don't change the clock here.
Right.
You can.
They can block.
If he
They
gives
can
him one
block.
to block, then it changes it dramatically. If he can't,
If he gives away the Exarch, then the Exarchs can block.
and it's untapped. Okay, so it changes the clock huge. I mean, right now he's got a 2-turn clock.
I mean, I guess I might be trying to even play for Batterskull and just like getting that on the battlefield and just attacking in big chunks rather than trying to play for Master of Waves. This makes you have to care about the Deceiver Exarchs. But we see him digging with Serum Visions to try and find something. I mean, I think he just wants counter spells at this point. The upside of Remand is that it gets you through your deck. The downside is all of the things that you cared about the preceding turn, you just have to worry about this turn now.
That's right.
He's
All right.
still not attacking with Master of Waves?
He is not.
Has he just forgot? I mean, he knows there's an Exarch in Shi Tian's hand, I guess? Because he remanded the last one? Yeah, he just doesn't want to get it blocked.
Ansi's hand?
In Ansi's hand, yes. Shi Tian knows there's an Exarch on the other side that could come down and block his Master of Waves, so he just keeps leaving it on defense.
But
Same goes for Snapcaster.
At that point, though, now you could have untapped Shackles.
Right.
If you weren't going to block anyway.
And last turn, it meant that you probably would have wanted to attack with those because you fought a fight over the 1/4 anyway.
No, I didn't. Yeah.
All right, so here's Deceiver Exarch once again for Anssi Alkio.
I think this one's in combat. I think he wants to block.
It's on the stack. I think this
not a
is
big
end step here.
The life totals change was recorded as 13 to
Yeah,
11.
I
but-
thought I heard Alkio say that he hadn't actually taken the damage,
okay.
but maybe I misheard.
Okay.
Not a huge difference between picking this fight in combat versus picking the fight at end step.
So we see the same loaded hand we've been looking at. 3 counter spells from Alkio. Only a remand from Chan's side. So, I mean, you're exactly right, Randy. I think that Alkio has kind of been grinding Chan out of resources, even though this isn't the tradition. It's not as though his hand's empty.
Yep.
It's just a lot fewer relevant cards.
Right.
Finding that remand is pretty nice, though, for Shi Tian. Remember, he didn't have anything of the sort. He'd already used the one in his graveyard with his Snapcaster Mage, so at least he has some amount of defense with the remand and a Snapcaster Mage to make Anssi Alkio use up a bunch of mana, though the pressure's just not there, right? I mean, the problem is he's doing 2 damage per turn, maybe.
Right. And especially if Master of Waves is just not attacking.
Right.
Mana.
Shot you have the priority. You pass.
Huh.
Okay.
So Exarch tapped an island. Exarch resolved, Exarch tapped an island.
Exarch tapped an island. Anssi
And now
Alkio says, my turn.
Anssi says, awesome, I have a guy without summoning sickness. This may
Right.
be the time to go for it.
This could be it. I mean, we know he's got a stacked hand with double remand, cryptic command, and here he goes. Splinter Twin on Deceiver Exarch. If this sticks, Anssi Alkio will take game 1 against Shi Tian. So let's see what Li has. Remand. That's your starter remand.
And before this game, I didn't really appreciate how powerful Remand was in a deck with this kind of mana denial.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, this buys him, again, just an entire new turn.
It is insane. Now, let's see what Anssi wants to do. Remember, he has cryptic command, but also double remand and a Snapcaster Mage.
And now, relevantly, with this Remand on the stack, Lee can't Snapcaster Mage and cast Remand again.
That's
'cause
right.
It's not in the graveyard yet.
Now, one thing that Lee does have in the graveyard, though, is a Spell Snare.
Which can counter a remand.
Which can counter a remand from Anssi. So it does matter here what goes. Now, I believe that Lee...
Command, right? Seems like Anssi should Cryptic Command rather than Remand.
Okay.
That way he's not going to get anything countered by the Snapcaster he knows about from that previous peak.
I completely agree.
And he's again got the ability to Remand, although he knows it's vulnerable to Snapcaster.
Shi Tian has 7 untapped mana.
Real question here is what I think for Alkio, whether he wants to fight now or later. I think you fight, yeah.
Yeah.
Cryptic Command, targeting the Remand.
Bounce.
He's going to bounce
Master.
Master of Waves.
He wants to have more turns to keep fighting if this doesn't work.
Exactly.
So counter Remand, bounce Master of Waves, and that's on the stack right now. Right now we have multiple things on the stack. We have Splinter Twin, that's being targeted by Remand. Remand is being targeted by Cryptic Command. Cryptic Command is also targeting Master of Waves. So
Shi Tian doesn't have anything, right?
Well, I mean, I think what Lee does
he can Snapcaster Vapor Snag.
Yeah.
He can Snapcaster Vapor Snag. He can
and
also...
then Remand is going to get him.
Spell Snare.
Well, you're right.
Vapor Snag.
Yeah.
Does he have that in his yard still?
Yeah.
I don't see. Oh, okay. It must be in there. I see the cards there, but it must be off camera slightly.
I think it is. He also can let Cryptic resolve and then Snapcaster Remand again with Splinter Twin still on the stack. But I like the Vapor Snag play a lot more if he has access to it.
Now, does he lose if that happens? If Shi Tian's play here is Snapcaster Remand, Anssi Alkio Remand's back, is that it?
I mean,
because doesn't the Remand go away if it's being flashed
Well, it's
back?
all it. I think Anssi Alkio is...
I mean, doesn't it get exiled?
Yes.
So it's not like Shi Tian can just recast it again?
If he's casting it from the graveyard.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So did this twin actually resolve, or did just the Cryptic Command?
I don't think Twin is resolved yet.
I believe that Shi Tian's still in the tank here.
If his plan is Vapor Snag, then he does want Alkio to tap Deceiver X Art first targeting itself so that he can get through a bigger attack.
Okay, here
but
comes
it looks
Snapcaster
like
Mage.
He would rather Snapcaster the Remand rather than the Vapor Snag.
Right. It's a big stack right now.
Either way, if one of those is coming from his graveyard, it is not going to work out well for Shi Tian here.
I mean, he doesn't have any more Snapcasters, so
the
Exile's not actually relevant right here. It would be if he had another Snapcaster. Okay, he goes for the Vapor Snag.
Wow.
There's a Remand. I think that does it, right?
Huge Remand right here. Yeah, if Lee had a Spell Snare, he'd be able to counter that Remand, but Spell Snare in the graveyard.
Right.
And only 1 mana up, only 1 blue mana.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, normally it would go back to his hand. He could just recast it, but it's gone.
Right, because it's being cast from the graveyard.
Because it's being cast from the graveyard, so it looks like Anssi Alkio is prime position here to take the first game from Shi Tian. It's been a grindy, kind of a weird control-ish type matchup here. Ansio's like, I have targeted your Vapor Snag. Lee has not conceded. Draw a card.
He's bluffing. He's just trying to represent.
He's just saying, look, I might have something.
He can represent another
But
Vapor
that's
Snag,
going to do it.
Yeah,
Anssi
there you go.
Alkio does a million trillion damage to Shi Tian and takes down the first game of the quarterfinals here from Pro Tour Born of the Gods. Great stuff. I mean, that was a weird matchup, right? 2 Valken Shackles, and it led to this prolonged game state that eventually culminated with Anssi taking a shot at it, failing, regrouping, doing it again, and getting there. So Anssi Alkio has the first victory of our top 8 here on a Sunday. Welcome back to the booth, guys. Marshall Sutcliffe here with Zach Hill, Hall of Famer Randy Buehler over there. Randy, what did you make of the Vidalcan Shackles there?
It was a lot more powerful than I realized. Like, I hadn't seen this matchup play out this weekend. Looking at the deck lists, I didn't think about how crucial those cards could be. And he's got what? He's got 2 in the main, and he just drew them both at the beginning of the game, so it created this game state that both the players seemed comfortable with. It seemed like they had thought through the implications, and they kind of like, all right, I can let that resolve, but then I'm going to have to tap it. Oh, geez, a second one?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I can just have multiple X-Arcs to feed to them and then eventually combo out.
It was interesting because we actually saw the hand size be the limiting factor, where like he had a 7 great cards, but he's kind of like, I need more, and even 8.
The turn where he discarded Pestermite, it was, if he'd drawn a land there, he would have been so much more powerful.
Yeah, it would. What about you, Zach?
Well, yeah, the downside of drawing those Shackles early, the upside was he knew he wasn't going to die anytime soon.
Yes.
The downside was he had 2 Snapcasters that weren't doing anything because his entire draw was just a bunch of permanents.
Right.
So that meant that Snapcaster was never able really to get ahead, and he wasn't able to really generate momentum, even though he had Shackles Shackles to be able to play defensively.
Right.
And we ultimately saw that lack of pressure allow Anssi to sculpt what was basically the perfect hand.
That's
Pretty
right.
close.
Twice, yeah. So one thing that we've done here for Pro Tour Born of the Gods is we're going to be doing best 2 out of 3 here for the duration. And what we're looking at here is a difference in sideboard, I mean, not strategy, but the way that sideboards affect the top 8. As, you know, in previous Pro Tours, when we were playing best out of 5 for some of the rounds, the sideboards were super, super important. What's it like now?
Well, the sideboards aren't quite as influential in a best 2 out of 3. So, I mean, the game 1 is just a bigger percentage of the match. I mean, they're still pretty relevant. There's still a lot of interesting stuff going on. But, yeah, it's one of these where coming into the tournament, some people, like, maybe it actually changes your matchup advantage. Like, if you have a deck that's really bad after sideboarding because you know everybody's going to be loaded for bear, it's actually a better choice now than it used to be. So that's kind of interesting.
Why don't we take a look at Deceiver Exarch here? That was ultimately half of the combo that won the game for Anssi Alkio.
Yeah, and I think it's worth it to actually walk through this combo because it's kind of confusing. You know, we saw him cast Splinter Twin. Everyone started scooping up their cards. No one actually won the game. The way it works is Splinter Twin lets you copy a creature that you control. Deceiver Exarch lets you untap a creature you control or tap a creature or a permanent opponent controls. You can untap a permanent too. We saw him untapping islands. Basically, what you want to do is target Deceiver Exarch with Splinter Twin, and then you make an arbitrarily large number of 1/4 creatures and attack for an arbitrarily large amount of damage. So that's kind of how this combo works.
Okay, and we saw that. I mean, you know, Anssi didn't request a pile of 1 million tokens or anything, but that is ended up what happening. Let's take a look at some sideboards here. Randy, you have Anssi Alkio's in front of you, and you've been kind of, you know, playing this match as if you were in his seat in some way. What are we looking at for the sideboard plan for Anssi here?
Yeah, he's definitely going to want the Dispel. I mean, this is exactly what that matchup is for. We saw him get into counterspell battles there, so that is coming in. There's not a whole lot else here for this matchup. I mean, this is not exactly an anticipated matchup. He might actually consider Lavamancer if he has stuff to come out, just to be able to deal some damage. I mean, that's how a lot of the twin decks would win without the combo. They would just be able to deal enough damage to their opponent. I think the real question is, what does he have in his main deck that's bad? And there's not a whole lot that's bad. I mean, he's got a Spellskite, which is probably still worth having. His main deck doesn't have much that's bad in the matchup. I mean, Electrolyze is better. It cycles as a cantrip. So even the cards that aren't particularly suited for this matchup, you know, they tend to be cantrips or they tend to be things that set up the combo. I don't think he sideboards much. I think he brings in the 1 Dispel. That's it. That's all he's got to do, but the matchup isn't that bad for him. We talked about it before. It's actually kind of a good matchup for him. His opponent's relying on Blood Moon to blank his deck, and Blood Moon doesn't actually blank his strategy.
No, not at all. You mentioned it when we were doing our pregame that, you know, one of the important things to consider is which cards you're taking out, and it just doesn't look like he has that many dead cards here.
Yeah, doesn't have anything he has to take out, doesn't have that much that he needs to bring in, the 1 Dispel, and he's ready.
Yeah, he's being rewarded here for bringing the build. You mentioned it as well earlier, Randy, that his build is the most combo-centric of most of the builds that we've seen for Splinter Twin. He's really pushed it in that direction. It's the cleanest build. Yeah,
I wonder, actually, whether Ancient Grudge for the Shackles is worth bringing in.
Well, what I was going to say is Lightning Bolt doesn't seem like it has that many targets. It deals with Snapcaster Mage out of the main deck, but
that's a good
Master of Ways, Pro Red, Batterskull 4 toughness. What do you think about maybe signing that out for anything? I mean, the question is, what do you want to bring in?
He can either say, I want the ability to win the game with damage. So, like, you know, 2 Vendilion Clicks, a Grim Lavamancer, suddenly Lightning Bolt is useful in sort of finishing them off. But I think I'm like your play better. If he takes all 4 Lightning Bolts out of his deck, doesn't bring the Lavamancers in either, he can instead bring in Ancient Grudge along with that Dispel. And the other card, like Relic of Progenitus, is relevant. Like if you have a Relic of Progenitus sitting on the battlefield, you can fizzle your opponent's Snapcaster by just wiping out the graveyards.
And you can even do it by just targeting them with it over and over and over for these really long games where you still get your Snapcaster.
Yeah, I think I like that line better. Maybe take out all 4 bolts, bring in the Dispel, bring in the Relics, and maybe 1 Ancient Grudge, something like that.
Yeah, he's even got a Threads of Disloyalty, which can take down, or not take down, but mitigate a Master of Waves. Why don't we take a look at the Shi Tian sideboard here, Zach? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so the thing that I'm trying to do if I'm Shi Tian or Shi Tian is Blood Moon is really bad in this matchup. It did something last game, like it wasn't awful, but like the second copy
didn't do enough.
is literally blank. And and I don't think it gives you enough value. So I think you want to take out Blood Moons. And again, I think you want to take out your Lightning Bolts because it doesn't kill Deceiver Exarch. There's only 2 Pestermites. So you get into a Spellskite fight that you don't necessarily want to be in. I like bringing in Flame Slash for precisely that reason. But I think the main thing that you need is the ability to produce threats proactively as opposed to having to tap a ton of mana. I think Master Waves is pretty weak for the same reason. So I think you bring in the package of 3 Vendilion Click, 1 Teferi Mage of Jolfer, which allows you to operate an instant speed and also not have to worry about getting your threats like blocked by Deceiver Exarch.
I see a Combust down in the lower right as well. Zach, talk to us about that one.
Yeah, exactly. Combust and Counterflux, both unbelievable in this matchup. Combust lets you take down a Deceiver or a Pestermite or whatever without your opponent being able to counter it. So it's just dead. It also can't be redirected to Spellskite because it only targets whiter blue creatures. Finally, Counterflux is just the just say no of this entire format.
Right.
You know, it basically allows you to say, okay, I don't care that you have a Remand, I don't care that you have a Cryptic Command. Whatever I'm fighting over just isn't going to resolve. So I like bringing in Counterflux, Combust, Click, Teferi, Flame Slash.
Negate.
And negate, obviously. Yeah, and negate is
lot.
unbelievable here. I think that's 8 cards. I think you take out 4 Blood Moon and 4 Lightning Bolt.
I like
that
it.
seems pretty clean.
That's a pretty big package.
It is huge. And I think
I wonder is that enough to tilt the matchup? Like Teferi in particular seems ridiculous. The fact that your opponent has to play everything effectively at sorcery speed means counterspells just don't work.
Right.
Anything that says any instant that says counter target spell is just turned off with Teferi in play.
Yeah, Teferi is totally
Teferi is
unbelievable.
insane in this matchup.
Yeah,
I mean,
is.
the Splinter Twin deck tries to do a bunch of stuff on your end step to make you tap mana or just to get pieces of their combo in play and then finishes up on theirs, and that just takes that ability completely away.
Yeah. The only other thing I'm thinking about, I might even leave in a couple Lightning Bolts for to take out Master of Waves. Master just seems really
Well,
bad.
it's not very good at taking out Master of Waves, unfortunately.
No. Sideboarding out Master of Waves.
Oh, you just want to take them out.
Yeah, I mean, they just seem loose.
The fact that Deceiver Exarch blocks it so effectively and can come down in the middle of combat and just pick it off. Shi Tian wasn't even willing to attack with them after he'd resolved them. So.
And this does give him more threats with 3 Vendilion Clicks and a Teferi as well to help generate some damage at some point, because he does have to win the game ultimately.
And I think having a couple Lightning Bolts in your deck is reasonable.
Totally.
Yeah. And there's also those Batter Skulls sitting there. Welcome back to the booth, guys. And it looks like players are ready to go. So why don't we get down to the feature match area for Game 2 of Shi Tian versus Anssi Alkio. All right, so Pro Tour Born of the Gods, we are in the quarterfinals. Right now, Anssi Alkio is up 1-0 over Shi Tian. And we are in the very early stages of the second game here. Let's take a look at Alkio's hand. He's got, 1, 2, 3, 4. He's got 5 Lander and 2 Serum Visions. Is this just like the perfect opener for him, Randy?
Gotta love it. All lands.
Not missing land drops, getting a little card selection.
Yeah, blue on blue often comes down to who misses the first land drop.
Isn't that funny? Because that hand against some decks would just
terrible.
be, get it out of here.
It is an instant mulligan. It has no business at all. But I think he's absolutely correct to keep it here.
So funny. Now let's take a look over at Lee's hand. So Snapcaster Mage, Spreading Seas. There's a Vendilion Click, you mentioned it. He did leave in a Bolt here, and we see a Spell Snare, but only 1 other land. So a much different look here from Shi Tian. He might have to be more assertive.
Yeah, I mean, Spreading Seas is a card that's actually kind of nice. Because,
does he start those? Or does that come in?
He starts 2. He has 2
He's
on the
2
board. My plan was kind of just keep in 2 because it's not great. Your opponent's a blue deck, but cantripping is nice. And, you can occasionally mess with your opponent's ability to get double red for Splinter Twin. And it allows him at least to cantrip here so that he can get more lands if he wants to. Because I agree with you guys. I think you just want as many lands on the board as you can possibly have access to right now.
Yeah, that all land hand has already got some gas now, huh? He's got a click, he's got a Kiki Chiki, he's got cantrip, another cantrip.
Yeah. He's going to crack a Scalding Tarn here.
Would you have mulliganed Shi Tian's hand with only 2 lands?
It's close. I mean, the reason that I keep it, I think, is that I have a cantrip and a Vendilion Click, and I think Vendilion Click is incredibly important in these post-sideboarded games. You need to clock your opponent. You can click targeting yourself to get another land if you're able to get the 3rd land. But Lightning Bolt doesn't seem awesome to me. I think you think about mulliganing, but I think I probably would have ultimately kept.
If he had the click in the opener, then I definitely agree with you.
All right, so here's his Serum Visions for Anssi. All right, top, bottom.
Oh, so we actually got word that Li Shi Tian brought out like Batterskull, his mana leaks. A lot of his threats brought in his entire sideboard, except for Anger of the Gods. So bringing in those Spreading Seas to be able to draw more lands. Vandal Blast, I guess, for Spell Skites. So
Maybe Relic.
And Relic of Progenitus, great point too. So definitely almost a transformational board.
14 cards?
That's I think 12 cards.
12
he has
cards.
3 Anger of the Gods. So interesting strategy from Lee's side.
Takes
That
out
is
Mana
interesting.
Leak.
Yeah, maybe he thinks that the game just goes long enough that
That's
it
how the
doesn't
first one
matter.
went.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I mean, definitely an interesting plan. Sounds like he and his team tested this matchup a lot.
He also got a chance to see how Anssi plays this deck, and he knows that Anssi Alkio's game plan is not, he's not aggressively trying to say, I have it, am I good? Like, he's going to go very long and try to make sure things
Yeah, Alkio
work.
essentially played around Mana Leak for the entire first game until
Yeah.
he peaked. He never tapped below Mana Leak mana until he had a peak and saw there weren't any.
Right.
I believe they call that next level play.
Indeed. All right, here's Vendilion Click for Li Shi Tian. Sure.
Sounds like Alkio sideboarded more or less the way we're expecting. I think he brought in, was that all the Ancient Grudges? Because he trimmed his combo a little bit. He took out 1 Twin, he took out 1 Pestromite, plus he took out 3 of the Lightning Bolts.
And he
And
brought
then-
in Batterskull, it looks like.
Oh, he
based on
brought in
his hand.
Batterskull.
All right, Anssi
That's the thing
Alkio
we
has
weren't expecting.
responded to Vendilion Click by getting a mountain, which is going to be an Electrolyze, 1 to the Click, 1 to you, while Li Shi Tian's tapped out. So no clock for Li Shi Tian, but he is going to get a Vendilion Click activation here still.
Pretty unbelievable Electrolyze, actually. Just kind of a straight 2-for-1.
Yep.
All right, so pretty nice hand here.
Although the Click is still going to,
Yeah, it's
I don't know, it's just sort of a half a card here or something.
So I kind of dig what Lee is doing, taking out Vedalken Shackles, which is one of the things we heard, because if you know your opponent's going to bring in Ancient Grudge and you're not going to win a fight over it, and you saw it's not as though Vedalken Shackles just is game. You know, your
That's a great
opponent
point.
can play around it.
Right.
You leave your opponent with some dead cards and make sure that you aren't relying upon something that's kind of sitting on the board playing defense.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah,
really
Shackles are his
cool
only
plan.
artifact, right?
Yeah. Shackles Batterskull, which he also sideboarded
So he
out.
took out all his artifacts, and his opponent has got Ancient Grudge in his deck, in his hand, in fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
And
got to be feeling pretty good looking at the Ancient Grudge right now and saying, heh heh.
Is he picking it up? Oh, look at! Did you see that? He went over and kind of grabbed it, put it back. There's also, clearly that's not what he
You think
wants
he's
to
playing
get rid
mind
of.
games?
I think
I think he is.
I think he's
He's
like.
trying to look scared of Ancient Grudge to make sure Alkio keeps it in his deck.
I think he is.
Man.
There's a Kiki Jiki, a Vendilion Click, and a Batterskull that he can choose from. Of course, Vendilion Click can't hit lands.
Right, and Lee's got the Lightning Bolt in his hand, so he's not just super afraid of Vendilion Click right now. I think he's...
It's still, it's a question of like, do you even take a card? He doesn't have to take a card.
I really
think-
like taking Batterskull
Yeah.
here because he has no answer to it at all. And once it's on the ground, once it's on the table, even if he kills the token, you just keep picking it up and
Yep.
casting it again.
Splinter Twin off the top for Ansio thanks to the Vendilion Click draw.
Doesn't have an untapped creature, though.
Yeah, and a pretty loose hand for Alkio at this point. If Ancient Grudge isn't accomplishing a lot, Splinter Twin and Kiki Jiki both need help. He's still got a lot of lands,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is exactly what you want. But Click is just going to die.
All right,
man.
and here's a Spreading Seas on Ansio's Mountain, leaving him with just triple blue mana here and ensuring that he doesn't get to do anything with red. And how far away is he going to be from casting Kiki Jiki with triple island in play?
And actually, I think Lee is just absolutely right when he's bringing up to 4 Spreading Seas. Because, my initial thought was, okay, there's only 2 colors. You're probably not going to lock your opponent out of red. But you don't have to lock your opponent out of red. You have to lock your opponent out of double red or
Yeah.
triple red.
Right.
Which is just a lot easier, especially if they draw a landlight hand. So, yeah, going up to 4 Seas can be really powerful here, which also makes Master of Waves, which was pretty mediocre in game 1, a whole lot better because you have just a bunch of incidental blue mana symbols sitting on the table.
This has been a fascinating matchup so far. There's a lot going on here. And Batterskull right again off the top for Anssi Alkio. So that has been replaced. He's also got a Scalding Tarn. 4 mana here.
Yeah, no matter how many mountains you turn into islands, Batterskull is still going to be able to be cast. So
That's right.
a really excellent threat for
And right on time,
Alkio.
Vandal Blast off the top for Li
Oh,
Shi Tian.
man.
So just in case Anssi Alkio has any aggressive actions with that Batterskull, Shi Tian now has an answer to it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just clear how much they've tested because, like, Vandal Blast makes absolutely 0 sense game 1. But if your opponent's plan is Batter Skull and potentially Relic, like Randy mentioned, it's unbelievable after sideboarding. You're able to answer essentially their trump threat for almost no mana at instant speed.
That's right. Anssi plays a tapped Steam Vents here. Happy to keep building up his mana base and just passes the turn back again. Shi Tian draws a Scalding Tarn off the top, which I think is the only land in his hand, so he's got to be happy to see that.
Yeah, and at this point, I'm really liking Lee's hand. You've got a Snapcaster Mage to start applying pressure whenever you want to cast it. Got Lightning Bolt for Vendilion Click. Spell Snare just good in this matchup in general. Vandal Blast for Batter Skull, and Remand on essentially anything that your opponent wants to do.
Here's his Serum Visions for Anssi Alkio. One on top, one on bottom.
I think in this matchup, if I could play just 8 Serum Visions, I think I would like to.
Yeah.
It's like all you want to be doing is cantripping through your deck.
Another land drop here for Anssi, and I think he's just passed the turn back. So content to sculpt his hand, build up his mana base here. He's got 6 cards in hand, I believe. Might even be 7. All right, passes the turn back, and there's Serum Visions for Shi Tian. So we see a lot of the same thing going on both sides. Both of these decks are the same colors, though they approach the game in vastly different ways. One of them, at its base, a mana denial deck. That's Shi Tian. The other one, a combo deck, which is Anssi Alkio's role here.
And definitely, I mean, one thing you're not used to seeing is the classical blue control deck being the deck that's operating more at sorcery speed, which is kind of what defined game 1. I think that's one of the reasons, as y'all were mentioning, Teferi Mage of Zolfar is just so unbelievable because it just completely inverts the dynamic of the matchup.
Right.
It forces your opponent to try and play on his main phase, which on top of everything else means no counter spells do anything.
Right.
So digging to Teferi is great here, and then those Vendilion Clicks allowing him to at least apply pressure. Serum Visions in the graveyard also turning on Snapcaster Mage.
Anssi draws a Snapcaster Mage for the turn, also plays an island, passes the turn back. Shi Tian plays an island and passes the turn back. He keeps playing
land.
Yeah, he
kept
does.
a draw that only had 2 lands in it, and has he even missed a land drop? I mean, it feels like he's played a land every turn of the game.
I think he has.
Yeah, it's like 7 to 8 lands in play right now. No, it's 7 to 7.
It is 7 to 7, so he has.
Yeah, Alkio kept 5 land, 2 cantrip. Shi Tian kept 2 land, and
1 cantrip.
Yeah, Shi Tian
1.5. He had a spreading seas there too.
Oh,
right?
no, I was counting the spreading seas. I wasn't counting the Vendilion Click.
I can't remember if he had his own Serum Visions there.
He did not.
I don't think
Alkio had 2.
All right. So got there. He definitely got there.
I mean, a little bit lucky there with Shi Tian, but Shi Tian has also totally won the battle of sideboards here.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Like, his opponent has brought in Ancient Grudges, which are blank, and his opponent has brought in artifacts that Shi Tian can blow up.
I completely agree. I think Chan just has the awesome sideboard plan in this matchup, and he's got Kiki Jikis that he can't even cast. You know, I mean, and there's only one of those in his deck, so whatever. But I mean, Spreading Seas is doing some work to try and trump your opponent's plan here. And I mean, Lee, basically, again, just not under a whole lot of pressure, not under a whole lot of incentive to do anything. He's going to be able to get a Snapcaster Mage on the board, generate some more value from that. But things are looking really good for Lee right here. I think really what you want to do now is draw Spreading Seas. Like, neutralizing that Steam Vents is just so unbelievable. Oh, man.
Second Snapcaster Mage hits the hand here for Shi Tian. I think he's also... Does he have a Threads?
I can't imagine why you would board in Threads in this matchup. I mean...
I think he has them in the main, doesn't he?
He does have them in the main.
So you mean why you'd keep them in?
Why you'd keep them in, right, exactly. I mean, you know, you can't get any of the major targets. You can get Snapcaster Mage, which is unexciting. You can get Spellskite, which would be unbelievable, except that your opponent only has 1 and you're bringing in Vandal Blast.
Right.
So
he's probably taken that out.
Alkio took it out?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
All right,
Yeah,
here's a Vendilion Click on end step for Anssi Alkio. You see that lightning bolt sitting there in the front of Shi Tian's hand. You got to wonder if that Vendilion Click is going to get buzzed here.
And that would be my expectation. You're still going to lose your Cryptic Command if you're Lee, which is powerful, unless you just want to Cryptic Command the Vendilion Click. That's kind of bold, though.
Yeah,
Then
risky-
your opponent
risky
could just
business.
combo you out.
Right.
Well, he can't combo him out.
Oh,
here.
again, I keep forgetting that you can't. Yeah, right. I mean, I guess he
Why can't
could,
he?
right, if he cast a Pester Mite or a Deceiver Exarch end of turn, untap,
Yes.
use both Steam Vents to Splinter Twin, but of course he's not holding that.
All right, so here's Remand on Vendilion Click. Draw step.
Alkios, of course,
End of turn.
says, fine, I'll just recast it. But that actually accomplished a lot for Shi Tian, because now it means he cannot be combo killed.
Exactly.
Alkio has tapped down to the point where he can't summon an Exarch or a Pestermite end step, so there's no combo kill possibility.
All right, so it's Bolt, Vandal Blast, Cryptic Command, Serum Visions, and the Snapcaster Mage. So he has Bolt redundancy here if he does
Right.
want to kill
I
Vendilion
think you take
Click.
Cryptic Command.
Also, Shi Tian's at 16.
You could take Vandal Blast and just
Untap,
jam
play
out a
Batterskull.
Batterskull. Yeah.
Oh, that's not bad.
That's interesting because Shi Tian doesn't have that big hit that Anssi does where you have to fear what he does every turn, right? He does relatively fair things as far as winning the game goes. The unfairness comes with his mana denial strategy. So,
Yeah, if Alkio had his combo in hand, I think Cryptic Command would be the obvious play. Like, you sort of clear a path for the combo, but he
Right.
doesn't even have two parts of it. So I'm with you, Zach. I think you take the Vandal Blast, untap, and play Batterskull. I mean, not only does it mean there's no Batterskull answer, he also can see that there's no counter for the Batterskull.
And then that
I
makes
like
it.
that.
Yeah, it makes it more
What did he take?
problematic.
He took the Cryptic Command.
Okay.
So Ansio disagrees with us.
It also means too that it makes it harder to, if you take Vandal Blast, it's harder to bolt Vendilion Click, because that means you've got a 4/4 germ. You know, if you have two bolts, you can just use both your bolts on it, which is not great. They can just pick it up; it buys you some time.
That's a good point.
As it stands, though, I mean, with Vandal Blast in hand, Lee is free to bolt Vendilion Click if he wants to, and not be facing down really any pressure. Of course, all of this changes if Alkio is able to draw a Pestermite or a Deceiver Exarch.
True. Bet he's wishing he had not sided out a Pestermite for that Ancient Grudge.
all right, so we're still end step here.
Yeah, and
And there's the Bolt. All right, so Bolt takes down Vendilion Click, leaving Shi Tian with just one land untapped as Anssi gets to untap himself, but he doesn't have combo pieces in play. That's not going to be a factor here.
Now,
Though running out Batterskull here is just going to get it.
Can he
Vandal
Batterskull
Blast.
with enough mana to pick it up as
he
a response
can
to
batter.
Batterskull?
He
I mean, to Vandal Blast?
absolutely can. He's got the exact right amount of mana to be able to pick it up in response to Vandal Blast. That would tap him out. If he casts Serum Visions, he needs, I believe, another land, but he's got it in his hand to be able to do that. That said, if he picks it up, then Lee can Snapcaster Mage or Remand on the Batterskull. And I mean, it just
Remand's
buys
not
Lee a
that
lot
scary.
of time.
It does
It's
buy-
not scary.
But I mean, the fact that he has enough mana to pick this up as response to Vandal Blast makes the click decision a lot better. I
Completely.
understand his line a lot better now.
Completely.
I will make the token.
All right, Anssi
He
says,
opts
I would
to-
like a token.
And you're right, because even if he took Vandal Blast, then Bolt on the Germ means that if Alkio picked up Batterskull, it could still get
He'd run
hit
it into
with
the
Cryptic
Cryptic.
Command. Exactly.
Okay, so pass the turn back to Shi Tian. He's got a Snapcaster Mage there.
And Snapcaster a lot better now with Remand in the graveyard and another Serum Visions in hand.
Ooh, Cryptic Command off the top there for Shi Tian as
Wow.
well. So.
Seems fair. Batterskull came off the top when that one got clicked, so they both top decked the card that got clicked away.
That's right.
True.
Serum Visions for Lee.
We need a little window on the display when someone scries. Oh man, a Remand in Alkio's hand, pretty powerful actually. Can help mitigate the Cryptic Command.
Shi Tian's just going to keep drawing more lands. Never going to run out.
He's got one in his hand already.
The basic mountain.
All right, top. Still thinking. No, still thinking.
Wow.
Top.
All right, commits to top, so that's never good news if you're sitting in the opponent's seat.
Well, then you're sitting there thinking, like, what is going to make my opponent
All right.
do
Vandal
that?
Blast main phase. Alkio's not worried about tapping his mana. He is going to pick it up.
Yeah. I
There's
mean,
a
Vandal
path for
Blast is a
Snapcaster.
sorcery,
Right.
and so he has to, but he's going to get in there.
14.
And now
Oh,
that he
right,
has a
of course.
Cryptic Command, he can counter it on the way back down.
if I'm Alkio, I actually like remanding my own Batterskull here and just like neutralize. Because if he goes Cryptic Command, tap, counter draw, that means it only has one target. So
Nice.
That's a good point, Zach.
it's just a crazy matchup. I mean, it's
Yes.
This matchup is kind of insane.
that's been a theme, I guess, as we've looked at modern decks over and over. I mean, just a lot of really interesting, intricate board states, a lot of like card-dependent interactions. It isn't as though any of these decks only do like one thing.
That's right. All right, so here's Batterskull from Anssi Alkio. Shi Tian. Is he going to give him the bad news, though? Anssi has ways to interact here.
Yeah, Shi Tian's trying to decide whether to point Cryptic Command at it. And he decides yes. Did he said counter draw?
He said counter draw.
And yeah, Anssi Alkio can fizzle this by remanding his own Batterskull if he wants to.
He could also, of course, just remand the Cryptic.
But if he fizzles it,
Batterskull.
yeah.
Yes, he's going to remand his own Batterskull here.
So Cryptic Command will have, if this resolves, and we can see from his hand that it will, then the Cryptic Command fizzles, Shi Tian doesn't get a card, and Anssi Alkio gets the card from the remand and the Batterskull back in his graveyard, and his opponent's Cryptic went to that graveyard.
That's right.
Right.
Very nice little play.
And that's exactly what happens. Again, Anssi Alkio he's got freedom and time here, right? I mean, he's under zero pressure. Well, okay, not zero. There is a Snapcaster Mage, but he's not under any type of immense pressure sitting at 14 life facing 2 power. And since Shi Tian's deck doesn't have the ability to just hyper punish him for tapping out on his turn, he can just fiddle around here and be like, all right, next turn, Batterskull.
Said, I mean, Lee does have 2 Snapcaster Mages still, so he's going to be able to fight over that Batterskull yet again.
Right.
He can also main phase Snapcaster another Serum Visions if he wants to. He can also just cast Serum Visions, so Lee still has a lot of possibility.
Yeah, I think he's looking at Snapcastering the Vandal Blast.
Oh, yeah, excellent point as well. If he right, because if there's a fight over Batterskull, that just makes it way less likely that he's also going to have the 3 mana to be able to pick it up again.
Yeah, he's got to get something out of that Vandal Blast.
But a big change right now, we do see Alkio has the Deceiver Exarch with the Splinter Twin in his hand. So if there's too much of a fight over Batterskull, Alkio could just kill Lee.
And Lee has to live in constant fear of Anssi Alkio just getting him.
We're going to see this again later in another quarterfinal match where you've got control on control, kind of 2 blue decks. Well, the blue deck, one of the blue decks can tap out, and the other blue deck, if it ever taps out, faces instant death.
Such an interesting dynamic. It is not normal.
Yeah, blue on blue, the edge, I think, goes to the deck that can afford to tap out without just dying.
Which is actually like really interesting because traditionally a lot of blue matchups, whoever can go bigger with cards like Sphinx's Revelation, use their mana effectively, frequently had the advantage. They call it going over the top.
Right.
But in this case, it's kind of the potential to be the aggressive deck while fighting a control battle that really puts your opponent on the back foot.
Yeah. All right, so Shi Tian decides to Snapcaster the Cryptic here.
Yeah, he's snapcasting Cryptic Command, but that's going to be met by another Snapcaster Mage from Anssi Alkio. He's got at least Remand that he can target here.
Wow. Which is great because the Cryptic will remove itself since it was flashed back.
That's right.
Right.
And he says, okay, here's Remand, target your Cryptic.
Remanding the Cryptic Command, obviously.
And it's different this time because that Cryptic gets exiled, meaning not only does he gain an absurd amount of advantage,
Remand is also
Yeah, that
resolves.
Remand should be out of the graveyard
Exiled.
too. We got to make sure that that one doesn't stay.
Yeah. So if Lee's like, okay, great, I set up what I want to do. I'm going to Vandal Blast that Batterskull. But
He
now
has
he's
another
just,
Snapcaster, right?
Right, he does. Oh, and you're right, there is a Threads. But yeah, he has another Snapcaster Vandal Blast, but now he just has no defense against the actual combo, the Plan A.
All right.
And you see him putting to the body, he's like, ooh. Spell Snare comes exactly at the wrong time.
That's right.
Spell Snare would have been unbelievable.
Would have been
last turn.
fantastic last turn.
So here is that third Snapcaster like we were expecting.
And there's Vandal Blast on Batterskull. And Anssi says, this is no longer my priority.
Oh,
there's
man.
Threads of Disloyalty on Snapcaster Mage as Shi Tian
Clearing
says,
a
it's
path.
beatdown time. He's got 4 of them on his side
He
now.
actually wins next turn.
Oh, yeah.
The clock
Four,
is,
drop him down
that's
to 8,
8
2,
power.
4, 6, 8.
And Alkio's at 8. Crazy. All of this setup, and it comes down to a 1-turn clock, and Alkio has exactly enough time to combo off.
Drop.
Exarch is going to have to go main phase block, or else Alkio dies to combat damage from 4 Snapcasters.
And Lee's lightning bolt.
He's going to run it out main phase while his opponent's got tapped mana.
Makes sense.
He's not going to try to ambush mid-combat. He doesn't want to risk Shi Tian getting another draw phase and untapping his lands.
So that would block a Snapcaster Mage, putting Alkio to 2, but Shi Tian has Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, so I was going to say, it's interesting because like this is one of those spots where if Anssi had more life to work with, he could consider not blocking, but he doesn't have that option here.
Well, the Lightning Bolt will kill Alkio, not the Exarch.
Right. That's exactly.
And there's Kiki, and he can go off right now.
Ball game.
And that's going to do it. Anssi Alkio takes down his quarterfinal match against Shi Tian. Congratulations to Lee. Anssi Alkio, congratulations to you as well. You're going to the semifinals here.
And again, tapping him out so that even though Lightning Bolt's only 1 mana, didn't even have that to be able to target Kiki, having some masterful play.
Yeah, Anssi Alkio played that match spectacularly well.
Yeah, that was fantastic stuff. What a crazy matchup, too. My head is spinning right now trying to figure this stuff out. Thankfully, we had you guys. Welcome back to the booth, guys. All right, let's head over to the news desk, chat with them for a little bit. When we come back, and it won't be too long, we're going to have our next quarterfinal match. So we'll see you guys in just a few minutes. Wow.
Wow, indeed. Thanks very much to the boys in the booth. Welcome back to the guys at the desk. Rich, BDM, Luis, here with you for the next probably only 5 to 10 minutes because we're going to get them out, we're going to get them in, and the quarterfinals are going to just keep on coming. So, Blue Moon against Blue Red Twin is what we've just seen. And Luis, let's start with you. That game 1, Lee comes out, he gets Vedalken Shackles down, he gets a second Vedalken Shackles down. Meanwhile, Alkio sculpting his hand. And on Twitter, people who had tested for and with Alkio last night were saying, we don't think we really beat one Vedalken Shackles. We sure don't really see how we beat 2. But we're sitting here now with Alkio a 2-0 winner. So what happened in game 1?
So the main turning point was when Alkio went for it. He cast multiple Deceiver Exarchs to tap down Shackles, which forces Lee to use them right then, before they get tapped. But what Lee really needed to do when Alkio wasn't able to kill him on that turn is just untap the Shackles and give the Exarchs back. If Lee sits there on 2 Shackles versus 2 Exarchs, just all untapped, Alkio can't go for a Splinter Twin. Instead, Lee kept 2 Shackles, keeping the Exarchs, and Alkio just played another one and then put a twin on it and fought through the counter magic, which Alkio does have more of than Lee.
Sure. And then BDM, the second game, and we saw Alkio super patient throughout that match. That was a real sort of, his demeanor was super smooth, very calm, very measured the whole way through. And in the end, pretty straightforward in that he just goes, well, here's a Deceiver, here's Kiki.
Straightforward, except I think both you and I were both surprised by... First surprised by seeing Batter Skulls, which made sense, on some level, but, not something that was obvious on the surface. Batter Skulls coming in from Alkio, but then double surprised that Shi Tian brought in the Vandal Blasts. He's like, oh, well, I think he's going to bring in the Batter Skulls. Well, I'll bring, because there was no other real target for him for the Vandal Blast other than the Batter Skull.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have predicted Batter Skull just looking at the list, but obviously they test the matchup.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
And seeing it in play, it looked very good.
Yeah.
That being said, the Vandal Blast doesn't really kill Batterskull since it's a sorcery. You just get to bounce
it vapor snags Batterskull.
Yeah, and that ended up, even though Anssi didn't win with Batterskull, it wasted enough of Lee's time, energy, and mana.
The fights they pitched over it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At lunchtime, we're going to look a lot at the big teams, how they fared during the weekend. But Luis, you've been in plenty of top 8 action, and many of your teammates have. In general, do you prefer to sit and play the matchup yourself on Saturday night, or indeed early Sunday morning? Or do you want to go to bed and say, off you go, Brian Kibler, off you go, Paolo, tell me in the morning what's going on?
I personally like to playtest myself because I generally am not even that tired after the event. That's not true of everyone. If you're tired, you should actually just sleep and have your teammates test most of the time. Also, it depends on the matchup. Some matchups you don't actually need to playtest. If you haven't played the Zoo matchup 50 times already, you probably don't need to do that much work. A couple games just to kind of feel out their sideboard. But I've always been in favor of testing it myself, just so I can get an intrinsic feel for the matchup and not just be told, here's what you should sideboard in and out. Right.
And to be fair, also different players can have different play styles with the deck. There's not always one empirical way to play the deck.
Yeah, and you get an advantage when you're playing something like Lee's deck here. It is an advantage to be playing this deck because even the person playtesting with it might not sideboard the way Lee would or play the way Lee would, and you can get a lot of mileage out of more rogue strategies that way.
All right, so that is quarterfinal 1 done. Let's take a look at the top 8 bracket for you here at Pro Tour Born of the Gods 2014. And there you see the first man through to the semi-finals is your number 7 seed from Finland, Anssi Alkio. Now, he's in the bottom half of the bracket, and that is where we're going to stay because our second quarterfinal features Jacob Wilson, currently residing in Canada and very much part of Team Face-to-Face Games, and then Chris Fennell of the United States. So here's where we're going to go. Let's take a look at Chris Fennell of the United States. You see him there on our big board here in the news desk from TCG Play. He's 31 years of age, a gold pro, so that's the second tier right near the top of the game, closing in on 100 lifetime pro points. That takes a lot of doing. He's played in 9 pro tours. This is his first top 8, 4 Grand Prix top 8s, and wins there. Washington, that was 2004. Let's move on and take a look at his tale of the tournament. BDM, what sticks out to you there?
You know, what sticks out to me about Chris Fennell's record here is he is someone known as a limited specialist, has one of the best winning percentages in limited matches on the Pro Tour and Grand Prix circuit over the last couple of years. But for this event, he has more losses in limited than he does in constructed. And I think that that's, I mean, you know this when you're playtesting with Ben Stark. Ben needs to really like muscle up and constructed.
Definitely.
You see people sort of go off the rails in one format or the other when they specialize in one. We talked to people who said, "Oh, I really playtested extra hard in constructed. I paid a little less attention to limited," and then they're like, "Oh, my drafts went to hell." So it was very interesting. The other thing that stood out to me was not necessarily represented there in that table is how emotional Chris Fennell was at the end of round 15 when he won his match. You know, this is someone who we really first saw show up 10 years ago. He kind of took everyone by surprise at Grand Prix Washington when he won with Charles Gindy and someone else whose name is escaping me at the moment. But been here for a long time, and he won that match, and he knew he was within a handshake of the top 8. And as he's walking out of the feature match area, he gets to the rail, and he just kind of like almost collapses with emotion, as it just hit him that he was finally going to play in the top 8. And so that was, to me, very striking. There was a lot of emotion in this going into this top 8, and it was quite a sight to see.
Yeah, it's a very interesting feature match area here. It's a little tighter than we've had in recent Pro Tours, and by the time you put 8 players in and all the camera crew and all the reporters, it really is the bear pit, and you've experienced a lot of that, Luis. Does it get easier?
I think so. I mean, once you're used to it, it kind of all just like fades away, and you should pretty much play all your matches the same. I know that everyone else says that, and
yes,
it is a hard lesson to take to heart, though.
But it's like video game speeds, right? Like the first time you get to day 2 of a Pro Tour, the first time you get to the top 8 of a Pro Tour, don't things kind of speed up a little bit for you? Like, and you have to and the next time you play, you're like, oh, that seemed faster last time.
Yeah, I mean, what the saying is, act like you've been there before. And it's hard if you haven't. I mean, once you have, it gets a lot easier. Your first top 8, tends to make it easier to make future top 8s.
Yeah. Did you have any advice for Jacob Wilson last night? Did you?
I didn't actually get a chance to run into him, unfortunately. But I think he knows what he's doing. He's got a good playtesting team, and he's actually pretty experienced. This is his first Pro Tour top 8, but I would not imagine him to be nervous in any way.
Well, why don't we take a look at the career to date of Jacob Wilson? He's a very young man. He's still only 18 from Team Face-to-Face Games. Another gold pro, 53 lifetime pro points. And they've come in the last couple of years. You see that first at Grand Prix Chicago in 2012.
Modern format.
Right, absolutely. 3 Grand Prix top 8s total. This is his 6th Pro Tour. So that's his resume. Let's move on and see how he made it to the top 8. Luis, what do you see there?
So the fact that he was able to go 5-1 in draft certainly helps a lot, especially since his previous success was in Modern, and hitting a 5-1 in draft just makes it that much easier for the rest of the rounds.
So he gets in with those 2 draws. It's quite interesting. We actually thought that he might attempt some element of dream crushing BDM in the last round, because he was in on 37 points after 15 rounds, and then could have just said, well, I'm going to play against Patrick Dickman, maybe put him out of the top 8, but they were clearly both very happy to get in and just, on we go.
Get an extra hour of playtesting in, get an extra hour of sleep in, eat before the rush,
I mean, even though Jacob could have played safely, it sounds like.
Sure.
First of all, you never feel safe till you're actually locked, until they actually announce it.
Right.
Even if you're like, well, theoretically I'm safe, there's still a bit of uncertainty there, and drawing was 100% of a lock instead of playing, which again, maybe 95%.
Right, even if it's 1%, if you've never gotten that Pro Tour top 8 before, especially, like, you know what I mean, you've never been in that position to make that decision before for a Pro Tour.
It's also a hard thing to do, to sit across from someone and say, like, I can make it, I'm going to try to knock you out for an advantage in the top 8. And it's understandable, but it is a tough thing to do.
Let's get to the decks. Let's begin with Chris Fennell. Let's take a look at his main deck for you. So there you see it. Bunch of lands on the left, and then Faithless Looting, Pro, Bolt, Grape Shot, all kinds of rituals, and Ascension, Goblin Electromancer, Sleight of Hand, Pass Flames. BDM, why don't you talk us through what happens with Storm?
So we saw a lot of Storm on camera over the weekend. Kai Buda was playing it. John Finkel was playing it. Their version played Desperate Ravings. Chris Fennell's list has, looks like Faithless Looting in that spot. But really what you want to do is you want to get a Pyromancer's Ascension down, and you want to get 2 counters on it by having, by Serum Visioning, by Sleight of Handing, by Metamorphosing, getting 2, and then really once you're able to start copying spells with Pyromancer's Ascension's ability, you want to start, Metamorphose, Pyretic Ritual, build up a lot of mana, cast Past in Flames, empty your graveyard, again, doubling all of those spells, creating a ton of mana, eventually finding your Grape Shot, maybe after sideboard finding your Empty the Warrens, and dumping, basically dumping all your spells into a bucket and drowning your opponent in it.
All right. Jacob Wilson, he has a deck. This is Malira Pod. Luis, here comes the main deck up onto the screen. Talk us through what Malira Pod does. In about 30 seconds, if you could.
What doesn't it do?
Yeah, okay.
So the loudest part about the deck is the combo of Malira, Viscera Seer, and either Kitchen Finks or Murderous Redcap, which is infinite triggers of either Finks or Redcap. So infinite damage, infinite life, and infinite scries from Viscera Seer. What the deck really does...
How does that work? Because I don't think that might be obvious to people.
Well, Malira stops persist counters from going on, and when the creature comes into play, it won't get a -1/-1 counter, so you can just keep doing that with a sacrifice outlet. What the deck really does is use Birthing Pod and Court of Calling to search up basically answers to anything your opponent has, and incidentally forming the combo. So it's a kind of like a toolbox deck that also has an infinite combo kind of latched in.
All right then. Well, the players are ready. We're ready. 1 quarterfinal done, 3 to go, every turn. As it happens, let's get back to the booth, headlined by Marshall Sutcliffe.
Hey guys, welcome back to the booth. Marshall Sutcliffe here with Zach Hill, Hall of Famer Randy Buehler. We're ready to go down to the feature match here. We have Jacob Wilson, we have Chris Fennell, a battle of 2 Americans, and 2 pretty tough decks to pilot. This is going to be an interesting one. Let's head down there now for quarterfinal number 2 here from Pro Tour, Born of the Gods.